Good morning, good afternoon, and if you're watching this late at night, good evening. I'm glad you're tuning into this video. This video is about the French Revolution, the prequel, the historical events that happened before the French Revolution, the causes, events, and much more. All right, here we go. Okay, for this video, we'll be going about 10 times regular speed, super fast, to try and get it all done as fast as we possibly can in this quick review video about the French Revolution. All right, here we go. Table of contents, part 1, introduction, definitions and questions, part 2, review, background, history, part 3, ideas, Enlightenment, philosophers, part 4, leadership, etc. Part 5, Revolution begins. Part 6, People of the Revolution. Part 8, Conclusion, review of the causes. And Part 9, that will be in another video. Here we go. Next slide. Part 1, Introduction, definitions. Here we go on the big idea, statement of inquiry, questions, review, and we'll talk for seconds about the timeline project, but there's a whole nother video about that again. Okay, definitions. You need to know the definition of what the heck is a revolution. We're not talking about rotation, we're talking about the Earth going around the sun, or the sun going around the moon, or the moon going around the sun. That will be in science class. What you need to know is a revolution is a sudden, radical, or complete change. Alrighty. A fundamental change in political organization, especially the overthrow, renunciation of one government or ruler, and the substitution of another by the governed. Of course, you also need to be aware that there could be a fundamental change of thinking related to ideas, technologies, as well as another concept about revolutions. Big ideas from British Columbia, emerging ideas and ideologies. Note that ideas and ideologies are underlined here. There must be a reason for that. Physical, environmental influences. What does that have to do with the French Revolution? There was a very cold winter. We'll come back to that later. Very cold winter equals a famine. Disparities in power. Notice that's a big idea in British Columbia, and there were disparities in power during the French Revolution. Collective identity is constructed and can change over time is another big idea. Here we go. Okay, revolutions. The statement of inquiry, S.O.I, stands for a statement of inquiry. In the absence of fairness in government, people can effect change through revolution. And again, that is a debatable idea. People have different opinions. On one side, people will say, never, no, obedience is important. Respect for authority is important. Obeying law is important. Obeying order is important. Other people will say, well, there are some cases, such as when there's a breaking of the social contract where certain things like civil disobedience and breaking certain laws are justified. But what laws are justified if you're going to break laws, if you're on that side of the debate? Okay, inquiry questions. Why did the French Revolution start? What were the causes of the French Revolution? And how can I evaluate which causes are the most important? And why is it such a big, important idea? Because history repeats itself over time and again. And if we see causes of revolution repeating in our lifetime, we can see a problem is coming in the future that affects our lives. Okay, review from grade 8. You learned in grade 8 all about feudalism. Make sure you understand it and see the comparison and connection between the feudal system that you learned about in grade 8 and the 3 estates. The main thing you may have learned about feudalism is that there were nobles and lords on the top, serfs on the bottom, and a middle section of knights and vassals. The key thing to note is that the 3rd estate is huge in France, and it includes the bourgeoisie. It includes wealthy merchants, lawyers, doctors, city dwellers. They are part of the bourgeoisie. They are not considered part of the nobility or the aristocracy. Okay, key background. Okay, the project, there's a whole separate video for that, for the project, so we're skipping right past the slide. Okay, key choices. We're going to skip past the slide. There's a whole separate video about the project. So take a look at that video on my channel. You can go to YouTube and search Antoine Vic Social Studies, and you should be able to find my YouTube channel. Okay, look at teams for more information. That is again on the whole separate video. Background. Part 2, review of the history for this section. We're going to get a guest speaker to come in. Today we're going to get Mr. T-Dog to come teach you about revolutions. Now, Little secret between you and me, Mr. T-Dog. The T stands for Tony. His name is Tony, but don't tell him that. He likes to be called T-Dog or Mr. T-Dog. That's right, that's Mr. T-Dog is coming as our next guest speaker to talk about revolutions. Okay, Mr. T-Dog is running late today, so I'm here to talk to you for another few seconds. What I'm going to talk to you about is royalty and the Magna Carta. The royalty wanted absolute power for the royalty. They wanted power, and there are different reasons for that. Some people argued it was because the power came from God, where Hobbes said it was for philosophical reasons, that it was necessary. The power was necessary to keep society safe and secure. And we'll talk more about Hobbes later. However, there was a time when the Magna Carta came to limit the power of the king, the power of royalty. Look at these nice, beautiful royal robes here. Okay, so there are many historical events that set the stage. But the Magna Carta goes back way in time, but it's one of those precedents that goes back way in time, sort of a review from maybe your past courses where there were limits put on the monarch. And why is that significant? Because that repeats itself again in the French Revolution, this idea of putting limits on the monarch and stopping absolute monarchy. Here we go. I'll take another look for Mr. T-Dog, see if he's arrived. Don't forget, his name is Tony. Don't tell him. T-Dog is coming your way. Yo, 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 Mr. T-Dog is in the house. Yeah, Mr. T-Dog's here. Okay. Review of the English Civil War. King James I of England wrote the true law of free monarchs. He wrote about the kings should have absolute power. James I was the son who came to power after him. He wanted absolute power. He was beheaded. The beheading of a king in Europe for the crime of treason raised the debate if treason was a crime against the king or against the country. Things that make you go, 7 Years' War, a quick review. France spent a lot of money and lost the war. It was so sad. Okay, France built forts and spent lots of money in the defense of North America. Battle of Quebec was incredibly important. Of course, it has connections to Canadian history. Battle of the Plains of Abraham, why is it significant? General Wolfe, Marquis de Montcalm. First Nations perspectives, Algonquin, Haudenosaunee. Now again, this is the 10 times speed fast review, so we're not going to get into this topic in this video. However, make sure you review your notes about these topics. Okay. What does this painting say about the bias of First Nations? Pause and discuss. If we're going on the slow speed, we would pause and have a discussion here. We're going on 10 times regular speed, so we are moving on from this slide. But notice who is who in this painting. Take a look and Google it. Okay, big ideas, big ideas, big ideas. Ideologies are ideas. Ideas shape the decisions we make today and tomorrow. So why are ideas that we believe so important? Because they influence what we do, our actions. What was this war about? The ideas of imperialism, the ideas of colonialism, the ideas of mercantilism. Make sure you look at your notes and make sure you know those terms. They are critically important. Okay, Louis the 14th, not to be confused with Louis the 16th or Louis the 15th. I love the creativity in the names of French kings. Okay, they just love to make it complicated so the teachers can have trick questions on the test to confuse students about the 14th and the 16th because they look almost exactly the same in Roman numerals. Okay, spent on Versailles. He spent money on Versailles. He was the Sun King. He thought, I am the state. The king is the state is the king. It's all about him. Does that remind you of any politicians today? Makes you think. Think about politicians today. Are there any politicians today that say it's all about me? You think about that. Okay, moving on to the American Revolution, aka also known as the American War of Independence. Louis the 16th spent money on the revolution to show strength of France and to get vengeance on those British. Of course, I speak English, so I can't be mad at the British. Okay, this led to more financial problems and bankruptcy. Going fast, part 3, ideas, thinkers, and the Enlightenment So make sure you've Googled the Enlightenment, make sure you know what the Enlightenment is, make sure you know some of the thinkers of the Enlightenment, some ideas, some thinkers, some philosophers throughout this time period and before. Okay, going way back in time to the time period of the Renaissance and Reformation from grade 8. You would have learned about somebody named Martin Luther. Why is he significant? He led an area of changing in thinking. In particular, he led people to read religious texts for themselves and to think for themselves, which led rise to a movement called free thinkers. Now, that connection is that people are starting to think for themselves. Think for themselves is a key thing. There's more reading, there's more thinking for themselves going on. Okay, Hobbes, John Locke, Robespierre, and Voltaire are other critical ones. Hobbes and Locke we're going to do in a whole separate video, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on them, but really in summary, Hobbes is somebody who wanted absolute monarchy for the safety and security of society. If you can think about that, that compares to a quote from a Star Wars movie where Emperor Palpatine wanted to form the Empire instead of the Galactic Republic to make a safe and secure society. The purpose is safety and security, to have absolute power. He said this because he thought life is solitary, nasty, brutish, and short, which means he thinks people are just going to kill each other or rob from each other if they don't have a strong leader, a strong authority, a strong monarch. Okay, Robespierre and Voltaire. John Locke and Robespierre agreed on the idea of a social contract theory, which means that there is a right to revolt if a monarch is not doing their duties. If they're neglecting their duties, there is a right to revolt. Also, John Locke thought there was rights to life, liberty, and property. Okay, here we go on with the next part, part 4. We're going to talk about poor leadership. Now, in particular, monarchy. However, Necker himself made some mistakes, and some of the advisors made some mistakes. But leadership is just such an important life lesson when you're looking at history, because leadership skills will matter in your life. No matter where you are, whatever you're doing in life, you can learn from other leaders to see what works and what doesn't. Okay, leadership of monarchy. The monarchy of France. They were very young. They were not prepared. They were not curious. And remember, this is something we can learn from for our own lives. Curiosity, being curious about something. Why? What's going on? Helps us to then ask brilliant questions and helps us to learn, helps us to be inquirers, which is one of the whole ideas of IBMYP, inquiry-based learning, investigation. Don't forget to be inquirers, to be curious. Okay, vision. What does that mean? Visionary leadership means you're casting a vision. You have ideas, or at least you're asking an advisor for ideas for how to find solutions to problems. Okay, reactive versus proactive. That means you're reacting to the problems rather than thinking about what are the problems going to be before the country runs into a problem like absolute bankruptcy. Locked the doors of the three estates. This is probably one of the biggest mistakes of the leadership of the king. Instead, he should have probably been there leading the meeting of the three estates, making sure things went well. Okay, and there was some reluctancy to do tax reform, and in this early part, the monarchy was concerned that the reforms were happening perhaps too quickly. It's debatable. Attempted to leave the country of France. This is probably another one of his big mistakes because the people of France saw that as an act of treason. All right. Oh, also notice the big hair pieces on Marie Antoinette. It's sort of a symbolism of the extravagance of the monarchy, focusing on their attention and time on the wrong things, the things that don't really matter. So remember, we can reflect on our own lives and be reflective learners. What really matters? What should we be focusing our time on? What we should be focusing our learning on? Here we go to part 5. Okay, the crisis. The French Revolution begins. When did it start? 5th of May, 1789. Why that date? Why that date? Why not earlier? Why not later? Well, it's all debate, but they just picked that date. Okay, moving on. May 5th, 1789. The king opens the meeting of the Estates General. I guess that's why they chose that date. When I say they, I mean historians like this date. This is considered the most, the start of the revolution by most historians. However, it could be debated, and a leader perhaps could have changed the outcome at this point. Still, perhaps, maybe. A good leader, a great leader. Okay. Why did they need to have the meeting of the Estates General? It had not met for a long time. France is bankrupt. Key thing. France is bankrupt. France is bankrupt. France needs tax reform desperately. And the voting structure note is flawed. There's a problem here. The third estate lacks power because there's also the first estate and the second estate. And note the order of which one is which. Okay, the king locks the door on the third estate. This is a mistake. Why did he do this? Think about that. Google that. Okay, tennis court oath. Why? They wanted to write a constitution. Again, we're going at 10 times regular speed. Here we go. 11th of July, 1789. The king suddenly dismisses Jacques Necker for no reason. Wait a minute. Who was Jacques Necker? I don't even remember him. All right, he was both praised and criticized by historians. He was the financial guy, doing the financial decisions, the management, the advice to the king. The king would rubber stamp his decisions. However, he's criticized for some of his mistakes, overspending on the American Revolution. However, he did also lead some tax reduction for farmers, which is one of the good things, which is why he's popular with the people, because he did good things for the poor in that area. So note, the key thing is he's popular with the people. When he's fired, the people are mad. A connection to your life, why this is important to you today, is one day you will be a leader of something. And when you are the boss, do not fire the wrong person. Do not fire somebody who's smart, talented, popular, who has solutions to your problems. Okay, 14th of July, 1789, the storming of the Bastille. See hidden notes. Okay, so the storming of the Bastille on dawn, July 14th, a great crowd armed with muskets and swords and various makeshift weapons began to gather around the Bastille. Lunet's men were able to hold the mob back for a short time, but more and more Parisians were converging on the Bastille. Lunet raised the white flag of surrender over the fortress, and his men were taken to custody. Bastille's gunpowder and cannons were seized. 7 prisoners were freed. However, not all of the prisoners. The prisoners in the prison were freed. However, Lunet was not freed. He was arrested and tried by Revolutionary Council, and he was pulled away by a mob and murdered. Okay, so just a note that there's something significant that happened with the storming of the Bastille. What was the motivation? They wanted the ammunition, the gunpowder, and the guns that were there. That was sort of the motivation to increase their power and authority. Okay, moving on to Neck. Okay, so later on, the king reinstates Necker, just in case you were confused about that. He does get reinstated, and eventually he's forced to resign again because the hostility of the queen and other people. Okay, August 27, 1789, Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizens. This could be one of the most significant aspects of the French Revolution in terms of its trickling effects on the rest of the world. This idea of the Declaration of the Rights of Man. Something key are the ones that are underlined here. So let's take a look at that. Men, which could be now interpreted to mean men and women, are born and remain free and equal in rights. And then we'll skip right down to the next underlined part where it says these rights are liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. Now, of course, these rights were stated, but they were slow to be acted on in both France, Haiti, and the rest of the world. It was a very slow process, but this started a process of moving towards making these rights a reality for more and more people. Of course, even in the own French Empire, slavery did not end in Haiti. Okay, not until there was another revolution called the Haitian Revolution. Okay, Declaration of the Rights and Citizens. Pause and discuss. Take some time to Google these rights. Pause and discuss with a partner to think which are your favorites, which ones do you agree with, and which do you disagree with. Pause right now. 5, 4, do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Okay, restart the video now. Moving on. Okay, October 6, 1789, the Women's March to Versailles. Marat's newspaper demands a march. The women demanded the king return to Paris. These people were strong women who worked. These are working women from the places of the food markets. Some of them would have been working with chopping fish and meat. Therefore, they were strong and they were dangerous women. Google the Women's March to Versailles for more details. This is 10 times regular speed. We're moving forward. Okay, June 20th to 21st, 1791, the royal family flees from Paris, trying to get to the border. And some textbooks you'll see, or videos you'll see, they're trying to get to Austria. What that means is Austrian territory, not Austria proper, but a northern part, which you might think of as sort of Belgium or Netherlands. Okay, people saw this as an act of treason. The trial and execution of the King Louis the 16th. What are the ethics and morality around his trial? What are the justifications and arguments? And what do you think? Was the trial lawful? Did this trial respect law and order or not? Part 6, the people, the French Revolution, Marat, Robespierre, Lafayette. These are just 3 people. There's way more. We've already talked about some. These are some we have not yet talked about, so we're going to make sure we don't miss these 3. Key people, Marat. Also, maybe sometimes people say Marat, Jean-Paul Marat, Jean-Paul Marat. See hidden notes. He had a skin illness that he picked up when he was super poor, living in the sewer. He got infected, so he had to have these baths all the time. He was a writer. He founded a revolutionary newspaper, which wrote radical ideas. Eventually, the other side had him assassinated. Google him, very fascinating story. We're going 10 times regular speed, moving on. Another key person, Maximilien Robespierre. Okay, he was a key leader in the French Revolution. He was a great orator at first, but he became more and more radical. Eventually, his radical ideas and terror led to him himself being executed, as people wanted him to stop executing people. Very fascinating story to see his rise and fall. It's interesting. Why is that so interesting to me? Because it's interesting to note how somebody can rise to power and influence, but also where they can go wrong and fall down the other side and do something that is no longer working for the people they're leading. But one thing to note, he was also one of the key leaders on the Committee of Public Safety. The Committee of Public Safety is kind of has a confusing name that you may miss, that it's actually the 12 people that ruled the French Revolution through the Reign of Terror. Also, we're not going to spend any time talking about the Reign of Terror, but Google the time period of the Reign of Terror. Okay, moving on. Key people, Lafayette, a noble-born revolutionary. This is also a fascinating story to look at some of the nobles who were noble-born and then just decided to land on the side of the revolution. He has a very fascinating biography, so I included even a website link where you can Google him. Also, there's many sites in the United States of America named after Lafayette. I don't have time to get into that today, but Google, why is there an elementary school in California named after Lafayette? Okay. What else should I say? Well, really fast about Lafayette, he went to the American Revolution to avenge his father's death. By 1780, Major General Lafayette was commanding nearly 2,200 American troops and was viewed as the official representative of France to the United States of America. Oh, and speaking of which, the United States of America might have been these United States of America in that time period. But at any rate, moving on, that's a little side tangent. He eventually negotiated for France to deliver substantial numbers of troops. And in 1781, 1,800 French sailors arrived. Lafayette marched his troops to Yorktown, where the British had decamped a large portion of its army. On October 6, the Allies attacked, and by noon, October 19th, the British surrendered in what was to be their largest defeat. The French were there! The French were there! The French were in North America. Think about that. There's interconnection of history between Europe and North America all the time. Okay. Where did we get to? Okay, it was led by Washington, but it was impossible without Lafayette. Just to remember that. Returning to France, Lafayette's love for liberty led him to join the noblemen who favored a revolution. After the revolutionaries stormed the Bastille, Lafayette was made commander-in-chief of the new National Guard, organized to safeguard the revolution's secure place in France. Google him, fascinating biography. Okay, part 7, the causes. Evaluate. Which 2 causes do you think are the most important and most significant, and why? Okay, possible causes. Pause and discuss. for 3 to 6 minutes. Do 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 do. Moving on. Start the video. Possible causes. What connections can you see in current events today? Continuity and change. Okay, pause and discuss and take a moment to Google current events today and a keyword from the French Revolution. Okay, moving on. Possible categories of causes. Historical events that set the stage. The 7 Years' War, American Revolution. Number 2, finances. Or you could have number 2 and 3 be combined, but finances overspending and finances unfair taxes. Finances unfair taxes could also be merged just to inequality. And number 5, which is inequality, wealth, power, and justice. There's also ideas, or ideologies. The Enlightenment ideas are one of them, but there's also all the other ideas associated with the Enlightenment. Ideas from the Renaissance, ideas from different time and place. Okay, the famine. What was the famine about? Cold winter led to a poor harvest, led to a lack of food and a lack of money to buy food. Therefore, there was hunger in France. Desperate people call for desperate times. And poor leadership, poor leadership, poor leadership. We talked about that already extensively. Okay, so those are some of the categories you want to think about, and think about what causes of the French Revolution can you put in those categories. What examples? What specific details? Part 9, Global Impact and Legacy. See the sequel! Woo! We're coming to the end of this too-long video. We're trying to keep it short and tight, 10 times regular speed. So we are going to save Part 9, Global Impact and Legacy, for a whole nother video. And of course, Napoleon gets a whole video all to himself. Next, if you can't wait to see the sequel, the Global Impact and Legacy, Google, Google, Google. Google is your friend. Here are some words you could put in Google. You could put in laïcité, France, news. But it could be scary. Okay, but maybe you want a Canadian connection. Canadian connections are more important. We are Canadian. I am Canadian. So Google instead Quebec Bill 21 and think about what you think. What is justice? What is fair? What is civil rights? Oh, and maybe add NDP Jagmeet Singh to that to see what he thinks about that. Okay, for a Canadian connection, law, Quebec Civil Code. Also, you could look at Googling Haitian Revolution or Napoleon. All right, thank you so much for tuning into this video. I hope you enjoyed this video about the French Revolution. The French Revolution. Okay, but really, I believe in peace and order and tranquility and calmness. Why do I value peace, order, tranquility, and calmness? Why, Mr. Vic? Why? Where's Mr. Vic? Mr. Vic, where are you? Oh, well, he's not here. But what I'll tell you about why Mr. Vic values those things, don't forget, I'm Mr. T-Dog, is that Mr. Vic is a family man. Okay, what does that mean? What does that mean that Mr. Vic is a family man? That Mr. Vic has children. There's one of his children there. And he doesn't want them to die in a revolution or war or tragedy or crisis or a pandemic. Dang it. Pandemics, no good. Don't like the pandemics. Okay, what else? Don't even want Mr. Vic's boys to die in a traffic accident. That's why this boy is wearing bright colors. Okay, so can you guess where this photo is? Let's go pause and discuss for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'll go get Mr. Vic. Oh, yes. Mr. T-Dog is correct. I do very much like peace, tranquility, and calmness and safety. Actually, I especially love the motto of Dr. Bonnie Henry in British Columbia. Stay safe, stay calm, and something else. What? Be kind, be safe, be calm. Those are all great in whatever order you want to put them in. Be kind, be calm, be safe. Probably you have to do be calm first, because if you're not calm, it's hard to do the other two. But I just love those be calm, be kind, be safe. You can also add be healthy, and if you want, be happy. But it's maybe hard to do that one sometimes, unless you are Okay, now the video is coming to an end, so it's time for our bloopers and outtakes. Bloopers and outtakes. Here we go. Okay, here we go. This is a video about the Russian Revolution. Oh no, not the Russian Revolution. We are the champions. We are the champions. The king. Is this video on? No, the video's not on yet, is it? No, the video's not on. What? No, the video! Stop that video! Cut! Stop. Okay, honorable mention. Some of the things that we didn't get to in this video are Women and the Revolution from page 218 and 219 of the textbook. Okay, in the very fast version, we didn't have time for Women of the Revolution. In here, we got Enlightenment. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. It could also be pronounced Enlightenment, but I would say Gouge, was a playwright, feminist, and activist. Her declaration of the rights of women and the female citizen were very important. There were the three Cotus, Charlotte Corday, Madame Roland, and Marianne. Make sure you take a look at the Women of the Revolution on page 218 and 219 of our textbook in Crossroads, a Meeting of the Nations. Napoleon? No, we're not going to do Napoleon. No Napoleon. Okay, one quick aside about Napoleon. He is a debatable leader. Napoleon led France in military battles with successes and failures. What were his successes and what were his failures? And what? That's not the Napoleon I mean. Wrong Napoleon! Ah! Cut! Kids these days haven't seen that movie. Don't worry about that, Mr. Vic. Napoleon Dynamite, they have no idea who that is, and they have no idea who Pedro is. Good night.